Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of HBTV. We are here today, Monday, April 12th. It's been a minute since we've checked in with y'all, but we're happy to hop back on a three-man booth for this one here. We are joined by first Steve Vidovich, associate editor at HoopBall. First time on one of these HBTV shows this season, Steve. So welcome to you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be a part of this. You guys have got quite a product here, and excited to get into some injury talk.
Yeah, we got a good amount to get into, for better or worse. So happy to have you on board. And of course, also joined by, you all know him as the middleman. He is a veteran of these programs here too at HBTV. Brent Carlson, man, how you doing? It's been a minute since we've talked.
Yeah, no, great to do it again. It's been a few weeks, and Steve, welcome to the danger zone. You've made it. So hopefully you survive. Be more like Maverick and less like Goose, and you'll make it through.
Danger zone's a good way of putting it too, particularly with the subject at hand here today. We, of course, as the title,
a bunch of gooses out there. Yeah,
these guys have been facing some danger so far this year. We are talking injuries. We are, it's a big time in the fantasy season. Some of y'all have already started your fantasy playoffs. And if not this week, then you're definitely starting next week. I would hope you're not starting the week after that, because then you're just nothing but silly season.
I wish.
Yeah.
I might get Harden and AD back.
And so that's so maybe you are wishing for it, because like the show's main topic today, we are focusing on high profile players right now that are facing some pretty nebulous and potentially lengthy injury absences. As the title of the show indicates, we're going to talk Giannis Antetokounmpo as well, but we're also going to touch on some other guys and just sort of our general thoughts about what the timeline is going to be looking like for some of these players, who some of the pickups might be without them, and just sort of some sort of strategies that you guys can employ as you head to this incredibly important stretch run the fantasy season, how you're going to deal with these top level players. So before we dive into things here, if y'all are new to the channel or checking in for the first time, please drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to us. Goes a long way to doing the content that we have enjoyed providing for y'all so far this season. And we got a nice schedule of shows this week too, so it'd be great for you to stick around and take a look at them. Yeah. So like I said, let's talk injuries, and let's start with Giannis Antetokounmpo. He has missed his last 5 games for the Milwaukee Bucks with a knee injury. There is no real word on the severity of it. I don't really think I've read anything out there about him practicing on it. The Bucks, have not indicated that he's going to be out long term, but without any real information to work with, we're just sort of here shrugging our shoulders. You obviously don't want your MVP playing on a bum knee heading into the playoffs, so he might be given some time off here, maybe more than he needs. There's no real way to know. So we're just going to start off here with you, Steve. I mean, what is your take so far on the way that the Bucks have handled this injury with Giannis? Do you sense that he's going to be out for a while? And if so, who's the main guy that fantasy managers should be pouncing on with the playoffs ahead of them?
I don't know if there's anybody on waiver wires in competitive leagues. I do think that the Bucks are going to exercise extreme caution with Giannis. And one thing that could be a benefit of it is maybe he gets a little bit more MVP talk with how the Bucks do without him. But from a fantasy perspective, the guys I like that I see getting a bump, Dante DiVincenzo, Bobby Portis is a guy that always seems to perform well when Giannis is out. He's a lower end standard league value guy. Dante DiVincenzo has been playing terrific of late, but these are guys that are already rostered, so it's tough for me to recommend any ads that aren't already on standard league rosters. I mean, if Bobby Portis is still hanging out there, I would pick him up and ride him until Giannis comes back, which is difficult because, like you said, we're not getting a timetable, so it's really unclear. And as long as we don't have a timetable, you got to hold onto Giannis. But for the meantime, DiVincenzo and Portis are a couple guys I really like, but they're already rostered.
It's true. Brent, same question to you. Is there one of those two that interests you a little bit more, or do either, neither? What's your take?
Well, Yeah, I mean, if you're in a competitive league, I assume DiVincenzo's roster. I mean, there's a chance Portis is out there. He's definitely someone that I would pick up. I think as far as away from the Bucks, some options that I've noticed in a couple leagues I'm in, and they're pretty competitive, is like Daniel Gafford is a guy who I've seen out there, and he seems to be back from his ankle injury. He got dropped a lot when they said like it looked like he was going to be out for like the rest of the season or something with his initial when he got taken out on a wheelchair. So there's a chance Gafford's available unless you're in a HoopBall league with me. Then I picked him up. So sorry. But yeah, I mean, this injury is tougher to figure out than how to spell his last name. It's like we don't really know how hurt he is, when he's going to be back. Some good news is that they didn't rule him out a day in advance for this one like they had been doing. So that would tell me he's maybe getting closer. So if you're an Antetokounmpo owner like I am in a couple leagues, you're just sort of hoping. We get this question all the time on the HoopBall Discord for the premium members. Do I start dropping these guys? And they send me a list of Antetokounmpo and Anthony Davis, and I'm like, you can't really. I mean, you're just kind of you're just screwed. I mean, you're just sort of in a tough spot. You can drop them and see what happens. In some cases, you might be right. In some cases, you might kick yourself. So I guess it really depends on how desperate you are. At this point, if fantasy playoffs are beginning and you're the number one seed and you're playing the A seed, maybe you hang on to them and see what happens. If you're the 8 seed or you're fighting for a playoff spot, you might have to just drop them and just hope, whoever you pick up is decent. It's a tough call. But I mean, as far as centers go, I love Portis and I love Gafford as, somewhat of fill-ins, I guess. I mean, with Wiseman going down, I don't know what's going to happen with that Warriors center situation, but Juan Toscano-Anderson might be someone to keep an eye on. He tends to get some fill-in, and he could add some D stats for you. But other than that, it's probably slim pickings out there. But yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah, with the Giannis injury, so like I said, he's going on 5 games, and I think he has been ruled out for he has not been ruled out for the April 14th game in Minnesota yet. That's still out there in the nebulous. And like you mentioned, that he has not been being ruled out days in advance. So it's sort of this situation where, with the lack of information we have, that's kind of the critical point that we do, is that if it is a little more serious that he could be out for weeks, we wouldn't be getting these updates the day of these games that he's being ruled out. So that would hopefully.
And I've seen him in shoot-arounds too. He's been shooting around before the game. So, I think it's worth monitoring there. And again, probably like there's been with the Bucks all year. If most of these guys are already rostered, Portis is the main guy who is on and off waiver wires, and he is the one who probably benefits like the most in terms of just playing time and role. Obviously, there's I think DiVincenzo, like you mentioned at the top there, Steve, and you too, Brent. Like he's definitely taken a step up offensively as well. So those two guys are probably benefiting the most as we go forward here. And as far as just, I think that your hope that here with Giannis is that he's just going to be back before things get a little too dicey. Let's transition to the Raptors here, who had a very interesting week last week where they had 5 games on the schedule. Very popular streaming team, none more popular than Malachi Flynn, who really stepped onto the fantasy scene with this very full stat line. He is capable of, I've called him a 5x5 waiting to happen. I mean, he is capable of getting you defensive stats. He's good at getting rebounds and assists, and he's had the benefit of playing giant minutes at that lead guard spot without Kyle Lowry, who was out with that toe infection, and Fred VanVleet, who's dealing with a left hip flexor strain. Lowry came back in their last game last night, returned to his usual allotment of minutes at 37. VanVleet, I think he's still a ways away. There's still no update on where he's at with that injury. Hip flexor injuries in particular tend to be very tricky, and they can have, very long. I mean, like Lonzo Ball is a great example of someone who's in the midst of dealing with this right now. I mean, you saw him miss about 6-7 games, eventually come back, and then ultimately had to go back out with that injury. You can't really. You got to be very cautious with not aggravating those. So VanVleet, on top of that, also has a 1-game suspension that he has to serve after a kerfuffle in the Lakers game that he wasn't even a part of, but he was on the floor for. The question I'm dancing around here and trying to get to is Flynn
without Van Vliet, still has some sort of role in this Raptors lineup. We saw him play 27 minutes last night, which is enough for someone with his stat set to be productive. Is he someone that you would is he someone that you're going to make sure to hold on to, though? I mean, I'll go to you with this, Brent. I mean, because last night's game wasn't that productive for him despite the playing time. Do you see a path for him to maintain fantasy value alongside Kyle Lowry? Or do you think that it's just going to be sort of a give and take type of deal?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, the minutes are there. So that's the first big hurdle. He's getting the minutes. He's going to keep getting them as long as Van Vliet is out. Then we have to remember this guy's a rookie. He's going to have a shaky game or two. So I definitely wouldn't let one huge game or on the opposite end, one terrible game, keep me away from him. As long as the minutes are there, I think you're going to get the production that you're looking for, especially if you're at this stage of the season and you're needing to go to a guy like Malachi Flynn for help. He's better than a lot of other options out there. You're probably juggling between like him or Ty Jerome or something like that at this point. I like him a lot. I picked him up in a few places or a couple places where I'm desperate with injuries, and I'm happy with the minutes that he's getting. And I just hope he's gonna do well. It's like, it's either him or what are you going to go to Reggie Jackson? He's playing too, and he's a potential guy. I mean, a lot of guys like that are real dart throws, but I like Flynn's upside. You're right. He's got that 5x5 potential to really fill it up. And, you just kind of got to hope that he does it on a night where you're starting him. And I guess that's a long way of saying, yes, I'm holding him as long as either one of Lowry or Van Vliet are out. And with the hip flexor, you're totally right. That's a tough injury. Look at what's going on with Ball. Look at, anyone in the recent years who's had a hip flexor. It's like the nightmare word for an injury, because the real only help for it, it's a lot like the plantar fasciitis. It's like rest is like the only thing that they can do. And that's the worst thing that could be happening to a fantasy player right now, is that they have to not play basketball. So I wouldn't count on seeing Van Vliet for a while. So I'm all in on Flynn, especially if I need guard stats somewhere.
Steve, what's your take on Flynn's outlook playing alongside Lowry? Do you see him still being in the top 100 discussion, or is he going to be a little outside that realm for you?
I think a hot top 100 is kind of like where my expectation would be with Lowry in the fold. I think that he's a nice guy to keep on your roster. Maybe Lowry sits, rests another game, and then he gets a bump in usage. I don't see him producing like we saw when they were without both Lowry and Van Vliet, but this is the time of year where you need to find players who are delivering some sort of value, especially in head-to-head playoff leagues. You got to have guys that are playing minutes. An injury really hurts. It really stings. When Brent was talking about all those guys on his team, I started to think of this metaphor with injuries, where if like you're in a fantasy league right now and you're in the playoffs and you're in your first week in the playoffs and you have a few guys that are out that are star guys, and they're like, when you're drinking a cup of ice water and the ice is sticking to the top of the glass, you want to hold that ice to the top of the glass for as long as possible. And then once it falls, just let it all fall, go and pick up the scrap heap, anyone you can, because at a certain point you'd have to make a change. I know I'm diverting the topic a little bit there, but when you were talking earlier, I started to think about that cup of ice, and that's how I would think of dropping these star players. So if you have like a Van Vliet on your roster, I would still hold him as long as possible, and I would wait until the absolute last moment that you can, where you're going to lose your matchup if you keep holding, and then I would drop and just make as many moves as possible to try and stay competitive.
You're down 7-2, and you're like within a couple of assists and a few rebounds and a couple blocks. It might be time to just go for it, man. Let the ice get the mop ready, and just go for it. I like that.
And Van Vliet, of the players we're talking about today, I'd say that Van Vliet is probably, all of these guys are first round level talents. And the soonest that you hear an inkling, like if we get an update tomorrow that they're going to say Van Vliet's going to be week to week, he's going to be reevaluated next Friday.
Done. Yeah.
Yep. You're out at that point. I'd say I would be too.
I would be. Yeah.
We all know how those reevaluated tags go. you're usually looking at least another week at a few games after that point in your best case scenario.
That's a good point, because we'll get to this in a minute, I'm sure. But like AD is being reevaluated on Thursday, and I'm holding him till Thursday. If there's something like we're going to reevaluate him in a week, and I look at my matchup and it's tight, I honestly, like, there's someone who's going to put a claim in. They're going to have to wait 4 days. By the time anyone gets them, it's almost the end of the next week. So maybe I've won 2 weeks now, and then, maybe I've gotten away with it. And maybe some guy picks him up and he comes back and has a few great games. But would have I even been around then if I hadn't made that move? That's the tricky part. So I will get to AD in a minute, but it's a great way to put it, Alan. Yeah.
And it's a fair point with him. And I think that the Lakers are the most interesting in terms of this conversation about when to drop, because, let's just transition into them now. Like, we're talking, like you mentioned, Anthony Davis, we heard over the weekend that he's going to be reevaluated this Thursday. Best case scenario, and this is stuff that I've actually seen out there, if things go well and he checks out fine, he's probably good to go by the start of next week. Best case scenario.
Yeah.
In that case, then there's no analysis that's needed there. You have AD, you've held on to him for this long. You don't need us to tell you to plug him into your lineup and, hope that he stays healthy. LeBron's the other interesting aspect, though. I think they said that he's 3 weeks away at a minimum. Steve, LeBron's on your roster right now, right this second. Your playoffs started today. Are you dropping him, knowing that he's going to be back 3 weeks from now? Yeah.
Yes. Unless I have an IR spot where I could put him there that's open right now. Yeah, he's a drop. I can't afford. Unless perhaps I have a first week bye this week if I'm in the playoffs. And then maybe I can just hold until the start of next week until my playoffs start. Maybe we can, we're going to get new information from now until then. That would be the only situation where I would hold him, or if I had an open IR spot. Those are the only two situations where I'm holding.
And it's really tough when you're dealing with someone like, it's so hard to put LeBron James on the wire. It's the name alone, that weight. It's just so hard to make that mental jump there. But it's important, and especially so, if you're dropping him, there's a good chance someone in your league's probably going to pick him up, right? Because of that name value there, and then at that point they're burning a hole in their roster. The Lakers have been tough this year. I think we all knew that this is the direction things were going to head for them, with the eyes set on the playoffs and the very, very short layoff between the bubble and the start of this season. But assuming that AD comes back, Brent, is there anyone on this Lakers roster that you're still trusting to be a top 100 value in 9 category leagues, with him and Andre Drummond absorbing the majority of the usage?
Dennis Schroeder, I think still have good value. Kuzma, when he's playing, is close. Horton Tucker, if there's no Kuzma, has been a pretty interesting play, but he's super. He has one great game, and then he has like a meh game. I'll speak for some of the dynasty and roto players out there, because I have LeBron. There's one dynasty league I'm in where I have LeBron, Gordon Hayward, Al Horford. I already had Klay Thompson, who I was sitting on in my IR. So I have my whole IR spot. And then I have Harden, Aldridge, Connolly. And I'm going into the first week of my playoffs, and I was the number one team. I won during the regular season.
I was going to say, you're in the playoffs at that point?
I was the number one seed. I had the best regular season because with AD out a lot, LeBron was huge, and Harden was great. So regular season was great. And now the playoffs start, and I'm the one seed, and I have none of those guys at all for maybe a week or more, but you can't waive them because you're in a dynasty league. So you just sort of be like, well, that sucks. I'm done. It was a great regular season. I hope there's a payout for the regular season. And then in roto leagues, I think I'm faster to cut those guys than in a head-to-head. I think if it's roto and you're trying to win some categories right at the end of the year, you got to cut bait on those. For people that are I'm in a couple roto leagues, a couple HoopBall ones. I'd probably cut bait on those. I'm crossing my fingers on Anthony Davis in one. So I totally feel everybody's pain. I'm right there with you because I just happen to have these guys. And the cool thing, it's not just one top guy. It's like all these top guys. So a lot of people are in this same boat. And sometimes it might be better to cut one of them and let someone, like you said, Alan, let it burn a hole in someone else's roster and just move on. Stop burning a hole in your stomach with what to do and just get rid of them and just move on. And then if they come back, just so be it, whatever. They'll probably be on a minutes restriction anyway, you would think. The more conversation we have about this, the more I'm like ready to jump on my phone and just cut everybody right now and move on because it's tough.
Well, I think you actually brought up a really interesting point about certain roto formats. Let's talk about like a games cap format where you only where you everyone hits the same threshold at the end of the day. Let's say that in a scenario you're doing pretty well in your roto league. You say you're in a top 4 position right now and you've got some games to burn. I would think that LeBron James would actually be someone worth holding in that kind of scenario. That would be the one. I mean, because even if we assume that 3 weeks is where he would be at, and that would leave room for maybe 2 weeks of regular season play, it'd be a little iffy. I mean, that he plays all those games down the stretch there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'll broaden this beyond LeBron. I mean, if you're in that type of scenario where you're sort of in a pole position and you have the ability to perhaps sit on an injured guy, are you trying? I mean, Steve, are you a big roto player or are you more head to head?
I play more head to head, but I do a little bit of roto.
I mean, I think, and that's sort of the same. That might be where we all are at.
Yeah.
But I mean, would you find that useful in that kind of scenario then? If you could get, let's say, 6 games out of LeBron this year, would you pick him up, say 2 weeks from now? Or let's say starting this week, would you pick him up to try and squeeze 6 games of like his production for you?
Yeah, I think it would depend on how many games I need to go through because I want to make sure I hit that games cap. So if I
don't leave games on the table,
if I can hold on to LeBron and play a full games cap, whatever that cap is, then definitely hold anybody who can deliver, second round value and above. And then it could even go for 5th round value and above. You want to hold those types of players. Below that, it starts to get a little bit trickier. But anybody who can return 5th round value, even if it's for 4 games, as long as you can fill those games up with other players, I would hold these guys. This conversation is geared more towards head to head, which this year is a
mistake,
a boon year for anyone who loves roto.
Yeah,
this year is the worst year I've seen for head to head playoffs.
I've had a brand new appreciation for roto this year. Technically last year was my first year ever playing a roto league. But I never got to finish it. So I don't have an experience in the stretch run like I am now. And I have so much appreciation now, given everything we've been going through with these injury reports and head to head. It's been real bad. And I'm also in like a weekly lineups league in head to head. Forget about that. That's been awful. The injuries have really taken a toll on me in that one. Matt had a comment here, and it wasn't a question, but I do like the names that he brought up and the not so subtle hint that he's a little concerned with his own setup here. Lonzo, Miles Turner, and Larry Nance all on the same team here for the playoffs starting today. And this is actually kind of an interesting scenario. I want to touch on all 3 of these guys. Let's start with Nance on the back end, who's been out. Is it officially IBS? Is that or is it known that that's exactly what he's been out for? It's been some type of illness that sort of kept him sidelined for a while. And from all indications, it seems like Larry Nance is actually progressing towards hitting the court probably this week. I read something that Jarrett Allen and Colin Sexton were able to be involved in their last practice. If today's your first week of the playoffs, Nance is on your squad. It's not guaranteed that he's going to play all of his games, but I do think there's a good chance he's going to play in some of the games this week. Are you going to hold on to Larry Nance? Brent, I'll go to you. Let's assume that he might miss 1 or 2 games here. Is he still worth holding on for the playoffs this week?
I think it's worth waiting a couple days to see what happens. They said he lost 20 pounds or something. He was like literally bedridden. So I'm more worried about him than I am like a Jarrett Allen or when Jarrett Allen had a concussion. He seems like he's doing basketball activities. With with Nance, I mean, that's scary. Losing 20 pounds, I mean, that saps your energy. That screams like low minutes, like building up wind or whatever it is they got to do. Their conditioning stuff. But he's so super productive. They did have some guys step up a lot, though, when he was out. And, I worry they're going to keep playing those guys, too. So, yeah, Nance is scary for me. But that being said, I'd probably wait to see the game Wednesday, like if he plays or if he's getting minutes, just to see. I'd give it like half the week, I think. If you're in a weekly league, forget it. Like, but
you're already done.
You're already screwed. Yeah, but I would wait probably till Wednesday to see what's going on. But it's a scary one with Nance because of the weight loss and they've had other people in his position stepping up. Mm-hmm. But that being said, he's a pretty awesome fantasy player, so he's tough to move on from.
Steve, I'm going to throw, but that was more of a general answer about Nance, which is I posed the question like, what are you generally going to do with Nance? But for Matt's team here, with Lonzo and Miles Turner with sort of iffy timelines, are you going to cut any of these guys with sort of the I don't know, these balls up in the air with their availability if this is your first week in the playoffs?
Yeah, I think this is a perfect correlation to the whole Ice Cube thing. I think that you got a few guys that are questionable for perhaps the whole week, that you might not get a game out of any of these three guys, or you might, Turner's out for tomorrow, but maybe he comes back the next game.
It's a Lonzo is dealing. So he may not be back. It's Tuesday, Wednesday for Turner, which means he won't have time to practice in between. So they usually keep guys out in that case. So you're probably looking at 2 games down.
Yeah. So I would say that this is the kind of situation where I'm going to hold if I can win the matchup without those 3 guys. Mm-hmm. If I don't think I can win the matchup without those 3 guys, I drop at least one of them. And if I was going to
go ahead.
If I was going to drop one of them, that's like really tough.
It is.
It would be either Nance or Lonzo due to the injury and the production. I do think Turner comes back sooner than the other 2 guys. If I was going to, but he had a bad ankle sprain. I mean, it
was bad.
I would drop one of them if I knew I wasn't going to be able to win without all 3 right now, just because I need to give myself a chance to win this week. You're in the playoffs. It's starting right now. You gotta pile up the categories early because you might not be able to do catch up come Thursday.
Yeah.
Brent, same question to you here. This is your team here, and if you can get away with winning this week with all 3 on your roster, great. But if you can't, who's the cut?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say Lonzo would be my first cut. The hip flexor, the team not being in contention, they have no reason to really rush him back or risk injuring that further, because that's the type of injury that can keep you out like a whole season if it gets bad. And I just say that because Nance and Turner seem closer to playing. With Lonzo, it's sort of like he could all of a sudden play. But
which is what happened the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
He showed up out of nowhere.
Yeah, but then he was great, and then he missed. But then he was out again. So I'm leaning towards. See, these are the tough questions that we get on the Discord, where I'm sort of like, "What do you want from me, guys?" Because it's really dependent on your league and your team. Like Steve said, can you win without these guys? Who's available on weight? Like, who are you replacing them with? Like, are you cutting Lonzo to add? In a super deep league where it's like someone who's going to play 10 minutes. I mean, or are you cutting them and getting, are you able to cut them and get Daniel Gafford or, Malachi Flynn or something like that? Are you able to get somewhat decent production if you cut them? Then I'd say I give it till Wednesday. If the categories look like you're getting blown out, I think you got to cut probably 2 of them. Probably Nance and Lonzo. Turner's his production is just too crazy. One game out of Turner could be 6 blocks for you and catch you up in one category. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean,
that being said, if
dependent.
if you're well off in blocks already, I'd say that like if you can because I mean Turner's value is all tied up in blocks. If you don't need them, then I'd say he's the easiest cut in that case. Then again,
if you have Time Lord and other guys,
and Matt, I know that you weren't exactly posing a question. We sort of extrapolated from your example here, but I do appreciate that because those are three very interesting guys with a lot of different elements tied up to them. And like you said, Brent, very accurately, it is all dependent on your team needs. It depends on who you're picking up. It's just like what is actually like the cost benefit here of making this sort of decision. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how all three of those guys develop. As we go through this here, and just you got to be ruthless. I've seen Dan Besbris say that all over the Discord. I think I even heard him mention that in his weekly lineup show. I think it's his word of the week. It is you got to be ruthless this time of year, and it's true. That is the way that you win. You maximize your games played, and sometimes that comes at the cost of cutting a guy that you might have ridden on the coattails of all year.
And then once you cut them, just forget it. Just move on, out of your mind. They never existed on your team. Just move forward.
So let's, and this has been sort of free flowing. We had a format of sorts heading into this, but it doesn't really matter. We're just talking injuries right now. The last sort of set of injuries that we talked about discussing that is in the same caliber of player is James Harden with the Brooklyn Nets. Last week we saw him re-aggravate his hamstring injury. After he at the very beginning of the month he was out for a period of time. With that, they came back, played 4 minutes, and then he re-aggravated and he was out again. Steve, do you think that they're going to approach this James Harden situation the way that they did KD all the way back in February when he re-aggravated that hamstring injury? Do you think that Harden, is it possible that he's done playing for the foreseeable future? Like, is he going to be available for fantasy playoffs in your opinion?
Ooh, if I was to put a little bit of money on it, I would guess that Harden would return at some point for the fantasy playoffs. I think that the Nets will treat it with the utmost caution, but not to the degree of Kevin Durant because of Durant's injury history with the Achilles. That being said, I don't think Harden's going to return in the immediate future. So if you're starting your playoffs now, you hold for as long as you can, but you might have to cut ties. You might have to, it's stealing the word, be ruthless and cut James Harden.
But I think he's the most interesting player that we've talked about so far, but because he's the best in a fantasy perspective. He is the most productive fantasy player here. I mean, our conversation about being ruthless, at what length does that go to? Are you talking about cutting a top 4-3 fantasy player if he's not, like, if you can, I don't know, say you can wait 1 week and he can help you in your second round? I mean, I know it doesn't matter if you can't get there, but it's a really tough spot. I mean, Brent, what do you think? Do you believe that the Nets will want to bring James Harden back as soon as they can to get there? I mean, is there a point for you where you got to get rid of him?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So with Harden, it looks like 10 days they're reevaluating, which was like a couple of days ago they said that. So you don't have him this week. If you're not going to win this week, you're right. There's no point in holding on to him. The league might get pissed because some guy who does win could pick him up and end up winning the league because of it, though. So there's also that. Do you want to be the guy who spoil the league? I just thought about that because I've seen that happen before.
You will get some nasty comments if someone just
or some team bailed on a guy and then the number one team swooped in and grabbed him and you wouldn't have won if you didn't get Harden in the last 2 weeks. But
integrity in fantasy.
I mean, he's so good. He's so good. I think you got to hang on to him and hope you win this week. Because if you do win and you get him back, you have a really good shot, especially with all these other injuries going on, of running the table. So I say hold on to him and hope. I mean, because who are you going to pick up? I mean, you're not going to pick up you're not going to win your league because you cut Harden and picked up Flynn or something. I think you're probably, because he's your number one guy, which is so much more production than any one guy off waivers is going to give you. So I think you kind of got to hope that you have the right lineup to get you past the first week. And I do think the Nets will bring him back because Kyrie's so iffy. They don't want to push Durant. They're going to want one of those three guys playing. So I think they do want to get him back. And I think they want to have him have some momentum for the playoffs because Harden, they don't want a rusty Harden to come back and get embarrassed with all these moves they made and get knocked out in the first round because these guys, because they're all rusty from not playing. So I feel like they are going to want to bring Harden back. And this could be just the Harden owner in me talking, but I think he's one of those guys that's worth waiting on because we have a little. We know what the injury is. We know kind of when he's going to be back. He seems to bounce back from injuries pretty well, and he can put up a lot of production even on a minutes limit. So I think it's just you got to kind of just hope you win the first week and then get ready to like get him back and do great. And yeah, then you won't get a bunch of grief from the other owners for handing somebody the win if you cut him and he comes back.
All very fair. It remains to be seen. These are tough times to be. You know, we got some decisions to make, and you got some leagues to win. So we'll see how that goes. We're kind of getting to our time here, everyone. I wanted to. There's some interesting comments in the comment section. I just want to do a rapid fire with y'all guys, you two, if you're interested.
Let's do it.
We got quick comment here from Ben. Jalen McDaniels or Chuma Okeke for a head-to-head playoffs that start next week. I think personally, I would go. I like Okeke more on a per game basis, but I think I'm going to lean McDaniels. Charlotte has 4 games to Orlando's 3, and Okeke's dealing with that hip injury right now. I think he's playing on a minutes limit tonight. Remains to be seen. I mean, he's young, and the Magic want to play him, so that he could get past that this time next week anyhow. But I think I'd lean McDaniels. Steve, what about you?
That's tough for me. I mean, I guess the 4 game week has to have me lean McDaniels because you just get the extra game. But if they were playing equal games, I would go with Okeke.
Okay. Yeah.
Brent? Yeah, I was going to say McDaniels too.
Okay.
The 4 game week helps. I love his ceiling with what he can provide. And did PJ Washington get hurt?
He's back in, or he figures to be. I don't think he's looking at a lengthy absence.
Okay. Yeah, but either way, yeah, I like McDaniels. I like what they're doing with him, and the 4 game week is good. So, and I worry if Okeke was healthy, then I might lean that way. But you know, hip injuries we've seen are no fun. So
no. This isn't a question. This is just Matt bragging, and I'll let him do that on screen. You can all applaud him if you want to. He was able to trade AD right before things went real south there. So congrats to you, Matt. John asked, "Is Allen? I assume Jarrett Allen back this week?" I think between he and Nance, he figures to be the more likely to be playing this week. He's been out for close to a week and a half now with that concussion, and I mean those can be very iffy too. But indications are that he got some shots up in practice. He was back out there a little bit, and I think that he will be this week. It remains to be seen if he'll play all of his games. But do you two agree? You feel like that's what it's going to be?
Yeah, and it could have been so much worse if it wasn't for the hair cushioning the blow to the head. I have Allen, and I'm rolling with him. I think he's back.
Yeah, one thing I would say that I think is done. People do a better job in fantasy football is just because someone is returning to practice, try and read into it to find out if they're returning as a limited participant, if they're a full participant in practice, what the team did in practice. That's just a general comment on fantasy basketball.
Basketball activities.
Basketball activities does not necessarily mean that the guy is scrimmaging. So I do agree with you guys. I would bet that Allen comes back before Nance, but back this week probably, but not definitively.
I think that's a very good point, and it's something that applies to pretty much everything that we've talked about here. Read a little bit beyond the blurbs if you can. See if you can get a sense of, like, read some articles that might dive a little bit deeper into these teams' thinkings about how they want to handle the injuries for these different players, especially those like in Milwaukee. Do the Bucks have an inclination to give Giannis more rest heading to the playoffs? They don't care about their seeding. Why would anyone this year? There are no fans. Or are there for the playoffs? I don't actually know what the plan is for that. Maybe.
If it's in Florida, then yeah, that'd be a full stadium. Yeah.
Anyway,
I think all the teams are close to letting fans in across the whole country.
I mean, I'm about to get my second round, so I'm trying to go see the Hawks play at some point. I hope so. I mean, we'll see.
I got my first round scheduled. I'm excited.
Here we go. We're getting towards the end there.
One point we brought up earlier on that to tie into the Allen thing is if you're good on blocks and rebounds, then maybe you're a little quicker to move on from Allen. If he's like your sole source of those stats in a head-to-head, then you probably want to hang on to him. But I'm leaning that he's going to be good. I think he's going to be okay and come back. But if you do start to hear like what Steve's saying, he's not scrimmaging. He's just, whatever basketball activities mean. Like he's, puts a jersey on and then goes and stands in the corner. You don't know, but I'm leaning towards it. Hopefully you picked up like Hartenstein or someone like that and you're balancing out a little bit. But yeah, look at your roster makeup too. That'll determine whether you can move on from a guy or not.
I would agree. Last two here. We'll keep it real short. Sam, I assume that you're talking about 9 category leagues because I believe those are the leagues we usually talk about on Twitter. What do we think about Monk's value once he's back? And I don't think much of it. I mean, it depends on who's in and who's out. If Gordon Hayward's out and he manages to come back like next week, he'll have a lot more opportunities to score. But he's really just a points guy, in my opinion. Steve?
Yeah, point streamer, maybe 3-point streamer. Pick him up for one game if there's a few guys out, like you're saying, and then drop him. He only has limited streaming appeal. Limited, very limited.
Yeah.
Brent?
There's a bunch of guys like Monk. He's not worth the risk. I wouldn't. Yeah, not a Monk.
Grayson
fan.
Allen's a better choice than Monk.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I'd probably. Yeah, honestly, at this point. And then Ben, just to wrap things up here, I think we might all be in agreement on this, given the Giannis conversation.
I don't know. Can you? No, I thought we were going to all say that.
You're doing that whole English teacher thing, Brent. Like, you can. I would. I would prefer.
If you can, yeah.
Right now, especially if you don't need assists. Saturansky, that's kind of all he's providing. I mean, he does a little bit of all around stuff, which is nice, but it's mostly the assists that is floating his value. Whereas DiVincenzo's got this big post Giannis bump that he's seeing right now. So I would do that. I'm assuming, are you guys? Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. That's 3 yeses. So go for it. Thanks, guys, for those questions. I hope y'all, got something out of from what we were showing off today with our these injury talk. Keep a close eye on not only the HoopBall fantasy feed, where we'll give you these updates as soon as we read about them, but read into these articles yourself. Local stuff has a lot of interesting information that will sort of help you telegraph what these teams are going to be thinking of. And if you enjoyed what you watched here today, please drop a like on this video. Please subscribe to the channel and give the 3 of us a follow on Twitter. Our handles are right there down below. Later this week, Wednesday, we will be back with a head-to-head playoff extravaganza. We're going to go through strategies, previews. We're going to look at game, streaming schedules. We're going to do it all. So if you got your playoffs starting this week or next week, tune in on Wednesday, and we'll be happy to go through some stuff, answer questions. It'll be a great time. Until then, we'll just check in with you guys then. So enjoy the rest of your night. Good luck to y'all, and we will check in next time.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.